I showed up to my daughter-in-law's birthday unannounced and saw my son hurting her and their child while his family laughed. I took a photo, looked at him, and said 3 words. He never came back from that. The image on my phone screen burned into my retinas, the kind of picture no one should ever have to see. But I couldn't look away. I should have. I should have turned off my phone, put it down, and walked out. But I didn't. Instead, I let the moment take root, embedding itself into every corner of my mind. Little Ava, their daughter, cowered behind the refrigerator, her small hands covering her ears. She was 4 years old, but the terror in her face made her look as though she had lived 1,000 lifetimes. And then there was Darius, my son, standing over them both, his fist still clenched, his expression dark with anger, as if the violence had only just begun. Behind him, his mother and sister clinked their wine glasses in the background, oblivious, laughing as if this was all some elaborate joke. How could they not see? How could they not understand the gravity of what was happening? 3 words. That's all it took to shatter the illusion he had built of himself, to tear away the layers of denial I had clung to for so long. You are doomed. I didn't yell, didn't raise my voice above a whisper, because that's exactly what they were. His fate, sealed by his own actions. The thing about those words, though, is that they weren't just about him. They were about me, too. About the failure that I had allowed myself to ignore for so many years. The failure to see who he had become. How had I missed it? How had I not seen the man in front of me? The man who would do this to his own family, and who I had once held as my child. My son, the boy I had raised, loved, and protected. Now reduced to someone capable of such cruelty. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning, back when I still believed my son was someone worth knowing. I remember the first time I held him in my arms, a tiny bundle of life that I couldn't fathom could grow into someone who would hurt others. He had been so small, so fragile. I thought the world would be a softer place with him in it. Darius, my firstborn, the one who taught me the weight of responsibility before I even fully understood what it meant. I thought I knew the kind of man he would become. I thought I could shape him with my love and discipline into someone who would be kind, strong, and good. As a boy, Darius had been sweet, thoughtful, and sensitive. He would sit at the kitchen table for hours, drawing pictures, his small hands gripping the crayons with such concentration that it seemed like the world would vanish if he let go. I remember watching him, thinking that I was shaping the future, that the way he treated his toys, his sister, even the pets, would be the foundation for how he would treat people when he grew older. But over time, things started to shift. It was subtle at first. Little changes that, when viewed individually, could be brushed off. A harsh word here, an angry outburst there. I told myself that it was just part of growing up, that he was going through a phase. Every parent goes through it, right? The teen years, the awkwardness, the rebellion. I thought I could handle it. What I didn't realize was that I was witnessing the first cracks in a facade I had been too blind to see. As he got older, Darius became more distant. The once tender boy who sought comfort in my arms no longer needed me. He grew into a young man who turned to his friends for advice, for validation, for approval. I tried to reach out to him, tried to show him that I was still here, that I still cared. But he would pull away. I couldn't understand why he seemed so unreachable. And when he left for college, I convinced myself it was just the next step in his development. I told myself he was becoming independent. But when he came home after his first year, something was different. The arrogance had crept in. He spoke to me as though I were a stranger, someone who didn't deserve his respect. His tone had hardened. The once gentle boy had been replaced by a young man with a chip on his shoulder. I didn't know how to fix it. I tried, of course. I tried to have conversations with him, tried to remind him of the values I had tried to instill in him all these years. But he would scoff and say that the world was different now, that people had to be tough to survive. I wish I had known then what I know now. That toughness, that coldness, wasn't just a defense mechanism. It was the core of who he was becoming. And I didn't see it. I didn't see that the kindness I had once cherished in him had been replaced by something far darker. When he brought Sailor home, I thought she was the answer. I thought she might be the anchor that would bring him back to who he once was. She was beautiful, kind, full of energy, and seemed to love him in a way that made my heart swell. Maybe, I thought, she could help him find his way. Maybe she could remind him of who he was before the world had hardened him. But then came the wedding. I thought it was a mistake from the beginning. I should have known. I should have listened to that voice inside me telling me that something wasn't right. But love is blinding, and I loved my son so much that I wanted to believe that everything would work out, that this would be different, that Darius wouldn't turn out like his father. When Sailor got pregnant, I thought it would be the moment that Darius would change, that he would embrace the responsibility of fatherhood. But the cracks in him deepened. And now, looking at the photo of that moment, the photo that was burned into my mind forever, I understood. It wasn't that Darius was incapable of being a father. It was that he was already lost. He had long since crossed a line that I could never cross back over. I saw the destruction in that photo, not just the violence that was so evident, but the way it tore through everything I thought I knew about my son. The man who stood before me wasn't the boy I had raised. He was a stranger, someone I had failed to recognize. The woman he had married, the child they had together, it was all collateral damage, and there was nothing left of the boy I had known to save them. It was too late for second chances. It was too late for redemption. The only thing left was the weight of truth, the truth I had been avoiding for so long. Darius was beyond saving, and as he stood there, fists clenched, surrounded by the laughter of his family, I knew that those 3 words, "You are doomed," weren't just a warning to him. They were a warning to me, a warning that there was no turning back. But in the end, I realized something important. It wasn't just Darius who was doomed, it was all of us, and it had been that way for a long time. The whole mess started 18 months ago at Darius's wedding. I should have seen the signs then, should have noticed the way Sailor flinched when he touched her arm, or how her smile never quite reached her eyes. But I was too busy being proud, watching my only son marry a successful woman who clearly had her life together. Sailor came from money, not the flashy kind, but the quiet wealth that comes from 3 generations of doctors and lawyers. She was a patent attorney at 32, pulling down a salary that made my construction contractor income look like pocket change. She'd bought the house where they'd live, a 4-bedroom colonial in the suburbs with oak trees older than me lining the driveway. The reception was at the country club, all white tablecloths and champagne flutes. I sat at the family table, nursing a beer and trying not to feel out of place among Sailor's relatives with their expensive suits and practiced small talk. That's when it happened. Sailor stood up, tapping her glass for attention. The room quieted. She looked at me, her smile tight and strange. "My father-in-law has been so generous," she announced, her voice carrying across the ballroom. "In fact, I think he should give us the keys to his apartment right now, as a wedding gift." The silence that followed felt like being underwater. I stared at her, confused. My apartment was a 1-bedroom walk-up in the city, nothing special. Why would they want it? "I don't understand," I said. "The keys." Her smile didn't waver. "Hand them over." "Sailor, I live there. It's my home." Her hand moved so fast I barely registered it. The slap cracked across my cheek, sharp and humiliating. 200 wedding guests watched as this woman I barely knew struck me across the face. "Ungrateful," she hissed. I looked at Darius, waiting for him to intervene, to defend me. He just sat there, swirling his whiskey, a small smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. I left before the cake was served, drove home with my face burning, shame and confusion churning in my gut. Something was wrong, terribly wrong, but I couldn't quite put my finger on what. After the wedding, Darius stopped returning my calls. At first, I thought it was normal. Newlyweds. They get busy, caught up in their own world. Maybe they didn't want to be burdened by family obligations so soon after saying their vows. It was a phase. I told myself that over and over as I stared at my phone, the screen lighting up with missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Numbers I didn't want to recognize. I tried to be patient. The distance between us felt like a shadow slowly creeping up on me, darkening everything it touched. When I did manage to reach him, our conversations were clipped and cold. He would answer with a tight, "Hey, Dad," and then quickly offer some excuse about being busy with work, with married life, with 1,000 things that apparently didn't include his father. It was always the same. "I'm swamped, I'll call you later," or "We're planning something this weekend, but maybe next time we can catch up." And each time, I would nod in silence on the other end of the line, pretending I believed it. At first, I tried to convince myself that this wasn't anything personal. He was a grown man now. He had a life of his own. But deep down, I knew something was off. This wasn't just normal distance between a father and a son. It was something colder, something final. A part of me refused to accept it, though, so I told myself maybe I was being too sensitive. Maybe they were just adjusting to married life, or maybe I had done something without even realizing it, to offend them. I couldn't imagine what, but the guilt was there, gnawing at me. I tried to make things right in the ways I knew best. I sent birthday cards, Christmas gifts, things I knew would get to them even if my calls didn't, but they came back unopened. Every single one. The cards, the gifts, the returns. It was like Darius had erased me from his life entirely. 6 months passed, then 9, then a year. The loneliness ate at me. At first, I tried to focus on the little things, the things that filled my days, work, my routine. I started going to the gym more, working on small house projects, trying to keep my hands and mind busy. But the silence between Darius and me wasn't something I could fix with work or distractions. It was a presence, heavy and suffocating. The more I tried to push it away, the heavier it became. Darius was my only child. I had poured everything into raising him. He was the reason I had worked the long hours, the reason I had sacrificed weekends and holidays to build houses for other people. His smile as a child, the way he ran to me after school with his arms outstretched, that was what kept me going. I used to believe that no matter how hard things got, I had something to look forward to. A son who would visit on Sundays, a son who would call just to talk. We had a connection, a bond that I thought could withstand anything. Now I had nothing. I told myself to be strong. I couldn't let this break me. But there were nights, long, dark nights, when I found myself standing in the center of my empty apartment, the silence swallowing me whole. I was alone, and the hollow space around me felt like it was closing in, slowly but surely. My ex-wife, my former partner in raising Darius, had moved to Arizona years ago, and the last time we spoke, it was brief and awkward. We had both moved on, or at least that's what we kept telling ourselves. She barely kept in touch, and I didn't push her for it. I had my son. I always had my son. Or at least I thought I did. I started working longer hours, taking jobs farther from home. Anything to keep my mind occupied, to fill the space Darius had left behind. My crew noticed the change but said nothing. Construction workers understand that some things don't need discussing. I wasn't the first guy to have family problems, and I wouldn't be the last. I kept myself busy, wrapped in the dust and sweat of the job, but the emptiness never left me. It followed me like a shadow, haunting me in the stillness of the night when I would finally collapse into bed, exhausted but still aching. It was on one of those late nights, sitting at my cramped desk with a pile of invoices and paperwork strewn around me, that I got the call. The phone rang, its sharp trill cutting through the quiet of the office. I glanced at the screen. The number was unfamiliar. It could have been a solicitor, some junk call, but something about it made me hesitate before picking up. Maybe it was a lingering hope that somehow, some way, it was Darius on the other end, ready to break the silence, ready to reconnect. Hello? My voice was rough, like I hadn't used it in years. Is this Darius's father? The voice on the other end was a woman's voice, trembling, shaky, as though she was standing on the edge of something she didn't know how to deal with. I straightened, instantly awake. Yes, who's this? My name is Margaret, she said, and there was a pause, a deep intake of breath that I could hear even through the phone. I'm Sailor's mother. We need to talk about what's happening in that house. The words hit me like a slap across the face. Sailor? His wife? What could she possibly want? Why was she calling me? I stood up, pacing, trying to process what she was saying, but nothing was making sense. The air in the room seemed to thicken. My mind raced. I tried to calm myself, to hold on to some semblance of control, but it was hard. Sailor's mother? What did she mean by, what's happening in that house? My thoughts tangled together, and I found myself feeling a sick twist in my stomach, a premonition I didn't want to acknowledge. I'm listening, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, though my heart was pounding in my chest. Margaret took a moment to speak again. When she did, her voice was quieter, as if she were gathering the courage to say what needed to be said. You don't know me, but I know you, and I need you to listen. Something's going on with Darius and Sailor. I think you need to know the truth. I think it's time someone stepped in. I felt a cold rush through me, a tightening in my chest. My hands were shaking now. I could barely hold the phone steady. What are you talking about? What's going on? Is Darius... Is he hurt? Is Sailor okay? I could hear her take another shaky breath. No, not physically, but it's bad, and I don't think she can do it alone much longer. Her words hung in the air, and for the first time in a long while, the silence between us felt more like a scream than an absence of sound. I didn't know what to say. I couldn't process it, couldn't make sense of the strange, disjointed conversation. Margaret spoke again, her voice firmer now. I'll explain everything, but you need to come. You need to see for yourself. And just like that, everything I had been avoiding, everything I had hoped was just a misunderstanding, was thrust in front of me with no way to escape. I was about to find out what had really been happening in that house, and I wasn't sure I was ready to hear it. But I knew, deep down, that I had no choice. Margaret met me at a diner 3 towns over, somewhere neither family would accidentally stumble across us. She looked like an older version of Sailor, same sharp cheekbones and careful posture, but her eyes were red-rimmed and exhausted. My daughter won't leave him, she said without preamble. I've begged her. I've threatened to cut her off. Nothing works. I don't understand. Leave him? What's going on? Margaret pulled out her phone, scrolled through photos. Each one made my stomach twist tighter. Bruises on Sailor's arms, purple and yellow. A black eye, fingerprints on her throat. She says she loves him, Margaret continued, her voice bitter. Says it's her fault when he loses his temper. Classic abuse victim thinking. Darius did this. It wasn't a question. He's been doing it since before they got married. I found out 3 months ago when Sailor showed up at my house in the middle of the night, bleeding from her nose. She begged me not to call the police, said it would ruin his career. I stared at the photos, feeling something cold and sharp crystallizing in my chest. Why are you telling me this? Because you're his father. Because maybe you can get through to him in a way I can't. She leaned forward, desperate. The waitress refilled my coffee. I waited until she was gone. Tell me everything. Margaret laid it all out like a prosecutor building a case. Darius had quit his job at the engineering firm 4 months into the marriage, claiming he wanted to start his own consulting business. That business never materialized. Instead, he'd moved his mother and sister into Sailor's house, rent-free. They didn't work either. Sailor paid for everything. The mortgage, the utilities, the groceries, the credit cards that Darius and his family maxed out every month. Her salary was direct deposited into a joint account that Darius controlled. He gave her an allowance of $200 a week for personal expenses. She's a prisoner in her own home, Margaret said, a prisoner with a six-figure income that's being bled dry by leeches. What about the police? Surely she could... She won't. She's convinced herself that she deserves it, that if she just tries harder to be a good wife, he'll change. Margaret's voice cracked. But he's getting worse. Last week, he shoved her down the stairs. She told the emergency room she tripped. I thought about the wedding, about Sailor's strange behavior. That wasn't her at the reception, was it? Demanding my apartment keys. Darius coached her, told her what to say, what to do. He wanted to isolate you, cut off any support she might have from your side of the family. The slap was supposed to make you angry enough to stay away. Margaret's laugh was hollow. It worked. Not anymore, I said. I spent the next 2 weeks becoming someone I didn't recognize. A man who followed his son at a distance, documenting his movements. A father who hired a private investigator named Tom Chen to dig into financial records and phone logs. What we found made me sick. Darius had 3 separate affairs going. One with a woman from his gym, another with someone he'd met online, and a third with his sister's best friend. He spent Sailor's money on hotel rooms, expensive dinners, jewelry for women who weren't his wife. The financial records were worse. He'd taken out credit cards in Sailor's name without her knowledge, running up $70,000 in debt. He'd borrowed against the equity in her house, cash that had vanished into his mother's bank account. Tom uncovered something else, too. A pattern of behavior going back years. Darius had been fired from his last 3 jobs for harassment and aggressive behavior. He'd been arrested twice for assault before he met Sailor, charges that his mother had paid lawyers to make disappear. My son wasn't just an abuser. He was a con artist, a predator who'd found the perfect mark in a wealthy woman, desperate to be loved. Sailor's birthday fell on a Tuesday in early March. I knew from Tom's surveillance that Darius's family was planning a party at the house, something small and intimate, meaning Darius, his mother, his sister, and Sailor forced to smile through another celebration of her own captivity. I decided to crash it. I showed up at 6 p.m. with a birthday card and a small gift, a book I knew Sailor had mentioned wanting years ago, back when Darius still let me visit. The front door was unlocked. I walked in. Darius had Sailor by the hair, her head wrenched back at an unnatural angle. He was screaming something about dinner being late, about her being useless. His mother leaned against the counter, sipping wine and watching with amused detachment. His sister was filming it on her phone, laughing. Then I saw Ava, my granddaughter, this tiny creature I'd met exactly twice in her short life, huddled behind the refrigerator, with her hands over her ears, tears streaming down her face. She was wearing a princess dress that was too small, probably a hand-me-down from Darius's sister's kids. Darius pulled back his fist. That's when I pulled out my phone and took the photograph. The flash got their attention. They all turned to look at me, frozen in a tableau of casual cruelty. Darius's fist still raised, Sailor on the floor, his family with their wine and their phones. I walked over to my son slowly, deliberately, looked him right in the eyes, and said the 3 words that would destroy his life. "You are doomed." Darius lunged at me. I sidestepped, years of construction work keeping my reflexes sharp despite my age. He crashed into the kitchen table, sending dishes flying. "Get out," he snarled. "This is my house." "Actually," I said calmly, "it's Sailor's house. Her name on the deed, her money paying the mortgage. You're just a parasite who moved in." His mother stepped forward. "You can't talk to my son like that. Your son is a coward who beats women and terrifies children. I'll talk to him however I want." I turned to Sailor, still on the floor. "Come with me, you and Ava, right now." She shook her head, broken. "I can't. He's my husband. I love him." Those words nearly made me give up right there. But then I looked at Ava, still crying behind the refrigerator, and I knew I couldn't walk away. "Fine," I said. "Stay if that's what you want. But I have this photograph now, and I have something else. I pulled out a flash drive from my pocket, held it up where everyone could see. Bank records, phone logs, evidence of fraud, adultery, assault. Everything you've done, Darius, documented and backed up in 3 separate locations. If anything happens to Sailor or Ava, if either of them ends up in the hospital again, this goes to the police, to Sailor's firm, to every media outlet in the state. You're bluffing, Darius said, but his voice wavered. Try me. I left then, pausing only to pick up Ava and carry her to the door. She wrapped her small arms around my neck and buried her face in my shoulder. Can I come with you, Grandpa? She whispered. Not yet, sweetheart, but soon, I promise. I set her down gently, kissed her forehead, and walked out of that house of horrors. Tom was waiting in his car down the block. I climbed in, my hands shaking with adrenaline and rage. Did you get it? He asked. I showed him the photograph. He winced. That's prosecutable, he said. Domestic violence, child endangerment. You could go to the police right now. Sailor won't press charges. She'll protect him, make excuses. We need something bigger, something he can't talk his way out of. The financial fraud? It's a start, but I want him destroyed completely. Career, reputation, freedom, everything. Tom studied me for a long moment. You know what you're asking me to help you do? I know exactly what I'm asking. All right. He pulled out a laptop, started typing. Then let's make sure we do it right. We spent the next 3 months building an airtight case. Tom traced every penny Darius had stolen, every fraudulent transaction, every forged signature. We documented his affairs with timestamps and location data. We found the arrests he thought were buried, got copies of the police reports his mother had paid to seal. I contacted a lawyer, a woman named Patricia who specialized in domestic violence cases. She met with Margaret and me in her office, reviewed everything we'd gathered. This is extensive, she said, but without the victim's cooperation, it's going to be difficult to prosecute the domestic violence charges. What about the fraud? I asked. The financial crimes are clear-cut. Credit card fraud, identity theft, embezzlement from a spouse. He's looking at 5 to 10 years if convicted. She paused. But you need to understand something. Going after him this way, using the financial angle instead of the abuse, he might take a plea deal, serve less time. I don't care about the time, I said. I care about destroying the life he's built on my daughter-in-law's suffering. Patricia smiled grimly. Then we're on the same page. I made my first move in June, an anonymous email to Darius's former employer, the engineering firm he'd quit. The email contained evidence of his harassment complaints, the real reason he'd left. Documentation he'd been stealing company supplies and charging personal expenses to the corporate card. The firm had no legal obligation to care about an ex-employee's misconduct, but I'd researched their board of directors, knew they were in the middle of securing a major government contract that required demonstrating ethical business practices. The last thing they needed was a scandal about how they'd let a predator walk away quietly. They issued a statement disavowing Darius, mentioning him by name. It went into their permanent records, available to anyone who might Google him for employment background checks. 1 week later, I sent a similar package to the consulting clients Darius claimed to have. Most of them didn't exist, but the 3 legitimate contracts he'd somehow secured all cancelled within days. The money spigot was shutting off. Darius started unraveling. Tom's surveillance showed him drinking heavily, staying out late, getting into arguments at bars. His mother's bank account, where he'd been funneling Sailor's money, suddenly showed large cash withdrawals. Gambling, probably, or drugs. Margaret called me with updates on Sailor. The abuse was escalating. He'd broken her phone so she couldn't call for help. Locked her in the bedroom for hours. Told Ava that Mommy was sick and couldn't come out. 2 more weeks, I promised. The fraud case needs to be bulletproof before I hand it over to the police. Those 2 weeks felt like 2 years, but she survived somehow. That core of strength that had attracted Darius in the first place was still there, buried under layers of abuse and gaslighting. Finally, Patricia gave me the green light. "The case is solid," she said. "Financial fraud, identity theft, forgery. The district attorney will take this." I hand-delivered the evidence to the DA's office on a Monday morning. Walked it directly to the prosecutor handling white-collar crime cases. Refused to leave until she agreed to look at it immediately. She called me that afternoon. "This is extraordinary," she said. "How did you compile all this?" "Does it matter?" "I suppose not. We'll open an investigation immediately. But I need you to understand, Mr. Anderson, that if your son figures out you're behind this—" "He already knows," I said, "and I don't care." They arrested Darius at the house on a Wednesday morning. I know because Tom was watching from his usual spot down the street, and he called me the moment the police cars pulled up. "It's happening," he said. I drove over immediately, arriving just in time to see Darius being led out in handcuffs. His mother was shrieking on the lawn, his sister filming it all, probably for some misguided social media sympathy play. Sailor stood in the doorway, Ava clutched to her chest, watching with an expression I couldn't read. Shock, maybe, or relief, or the terrible confusion of loving someone who'd destroyed her. I parked across the street and waited. After the police cars left, after Darius's mother and sister had stormed off to find a bail bondsman, I walked up to the house. Sailor saw me coming. She didn't close the door. "You did this," she said. Not an accusation, just a statement of fact. "Yes." "Why?" I looked at Ava, peeking out from behind her mother's legs. "Because someone had to." Sailor started crying then, great heaving sobs that shook her whole body. I stepped inside, closed the door, and just stood there while she fell apart. Ava came to me, took my hand. "Is Daddy gone?" she asked. "Yes, sweetheart, he's gone." "Good, he was scary." Out of the mouths of babes. Sailor's breakdown lasted 3 days. I stayed at the house, sleeping on the couch, making sure she and Ava ate and bathed, and maintained some semblance of routine. Margaret came too, and together we formed a protective barrier around Sailor while she processed what was happening. On the 4th day, she came downstairs dressed for the first time since the arrest. Her face was puffy from crying, but her eyes were clearer than I'd seen them in months. "I need to press charges," she said. "The domestic violence, everything." "You don't have to," I told her. "The fraud case is solid. He's going to prison regardless." "I need to, for me, for Ava." She sat down, looked at me directly. "And I need you to tell me everything. All the evidence you gathered, all the things you found. I deserve to know the truth about my husband." So I told her. About the affairs, the theft, the lies. The arrests his mother had covered up. The pattern of abuse that predated their relationship. The fake consulting business, the maxed-out credit cards, the money he'd stolen from her. With each revelation, she got smaller, curling in on herself like she was trying to disappear. But she didn't stop me, didn't ask me to sugarcoat anything. When I finished, she was silent for a long time. "I'm an idiot," she finally said. "No, you're a victim. There's a difference. I'm a lawyer. I should have known better, should have seen the signs. Abusers are experts at hiding who they really are. That's why they're successful." I leaned forward. "But you're awake now. And you're stronger than you think. You survived him. That takes incredible courage." She laughed bitterly. "Courage. Right. I mean it. Lesser people would have broken completely. You kept working, kept taking care of Ava, kept your sanity despite everything he did. That's not weakness, Sailor. That's steel." Something shifted in her expression, a glimpse of the woman she'd been before Darius, confident and capable. "I want a divorce," she said, "and I want him to pay for what he did to us." "Then let's make it happen." Patricia filed both cases simultaneously. criminal charges for the financial fraud, civil charges for the domestic violence and divorce proceedings. The strategy was calculated: overwhelm Darius on multiple fronts, force him to defend himself in criminal and family court at the same time. His lawyer, a public defender who looked overwhelmed from day one, tried to get the cases separated. The judge denied the motion. Everything would proceed together. Saylor gave her deposition first. 3 hours of recounting every beating, every threat, every incident of financial abuse. Patricia recorded it all, built a timeline that was damning in its completeness. Then came Darius's deposition. His lawyer advised him to plead the fifth on most questions, but his arrogance got the better of him. He couldn't resist trying to explain himself, to justify his actions. "She provoked me," he said on the record. "If she'd just done what I asked, been a better wife, none of this would have happened." Patricia didn't even try to hide her satisfaction. "So you're admitting you hit her?" "I'm saying she made me lose my temper. There's a difference." "For the record, there isn't." The deposition ended with Darius screaming at Patricia, his lawyer physically restraining him. It was the best possible outcome for our side. Darius's mother and sister complicated things. They corroborated his version of events, claimed Saylor was a liar who'd seduced their poor, innocent Darius and trapped him in a loveless marriage. They said the bruises were makeup, that Saylor was the real abuser. Patricia demolished them on cross-examination. "You were present in the house when the alleged abuse took place?" "Yes." "And you did nothing to intervene?" "There was nothing to intervene in. It never happened." Patricia showed them the photograph I'd taken. The one of Darius with his fist raised, Saylor on the floor, Ava crying behind the refrigerator. "Still want to claim nothing happened?" Darius's mother tried to say it was photoshopped. The metadata proved otherwise. His sister tried to say Saylor had staged it. The timestamp showed it was taken during the birthday party, matching dozens of other photos on social media from that night. They were exposed as liars and accomplices. The jury would eat them alive. 6 months into the legal battle, Darius's lawyer approached Patricia with a plea deal. He'd plead guilty to the fraud charges in exchange for a reduced sentence and dropping the domestic violence case. Patricia brought the offer to Saylor and me. "What do you think?" she asked. Saylor's answer was immediate. "No, I want him to face trial for what he did to me and Ava." "The fraud charges carry a longer sentence," Patricia pointed out. 10 years versus 5 for domestic violence. If you want to maximize his prison time, taking the deal might be smarter. "I don't care about his prison time," Saylor said, her voice hard. "I care about the truth being public record. I want everyone to know what kind of man he is. I want it on paper that he beat me, that he terrorized our daughter. The fraud is just money. The abuse is who he really is." I'd never been prouder of anyone in my life. "Then we go to trial," Patricia said. The trial was set for November, 9 months after Darius's arrest. We spent those months preparing, rehearsing testimony, building exhibits that would show the jury exactly what Darius had done. Saylor transformed during that time. She started therapy, joined a support group for domestic violence survivors. She took back control of her finances, discovered Darius had stolen nearly $200,000 over the course of their marriage. She filed a civil suit for that money, though we all knew he'd never be able to pay it back. Most importantly, she started healing. Ava went to therapy too, working through her trauma with a child psychologist who specialized in domestic abuse cases. She drew pictures of her family: Saylor, me, her grandmother Margaret. Darius didn't appear in a single one. As for me, I went back to work, to my normal life. But something had changed. The emptiness I'd felt before, the loneliness of having no family, had been replaced by purpose. I had Saylor and Ava now. They needed me, and I needed them. We became a strange little unit, bound by trauma but growing stronger together. The courthouse was packed on the first day of trial. Domestic violence cases always drew crowds, people hungry for drama and justice in equal measure. I sat behind Sailor, my presence a silent show of support. Darius was brought in, wearing a suit his mother had probably bought for him. He looked thinner than before, his face haggard from jail. He didn't look at Sailor or me, just stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. The prosecution's opening statement laid out the case methodically. Financial fraud that had devastated Sailor's finances. A pattern of domestic violence that had escalated over 18 months. Photographic evidence, medical records, witness testimony that would prove beyond reasonable doubt that Darius was guilty on all counts. The defense's opening was predictable. Sailor was a vindictive ex-wife. I was a vengeful father who'd manipulated evidence. The photo was taken out of context. The financial transactions were misunderstandings, not crimes. The jury looked skeptical from the start. Sailor took the stand on day 3. Patricia led her through her testimony carefully, building a narrative that was impossible to dismiss. When did you first realize your husband was abusing you? I don't know that I ever realized it while it was happening. He was so good at making me believe it was my fault, that I wasn't trying hard enough to make him happy. Can you describe the first time he hit you? Sailor's voice remained steady, though I could see her hands shaking. We'd been married 2 weeks. I came home late from work and dinner wasn't ready. He slapped me across the face and told me I needed to learn to be a better wife. Did you report this to police? No. I thought it was a one-time thing, that the stress of the wedding had gotten to him. I believed him when he said it would never happen again. But it did happen again. Yes, over and over. It got worse after his mother and sister moved in. It was like having an audience encouraged him. Patricia showed the jury the photograph I'd taken, projected it on a screen where everyone could see Sailor's split lip, Ava's terrified face, Darius's raised fist. Can you describe what was happening in this photo? Sailor took a breath. He was angry that dinner was late. He'd been drinking. He grabbed me by the hair and threw me against the counter. Then he started hitting me. His mother and sister were watching, laughing. Ava was hiding behind the refrigerator. That's when my father-in-law walked in and took the picture. The defense attorney objected, claiming hearsay. The judge overruled. The photograph spoke for itself. Sailor testified for 6 hours. By the end, half the jury was crying. Over the next week, Patricia built her case brick by brick. She called the emergency room doctor, who'd treated Sailor's broken ribs after Darius shoved her down the stairs. The neighbor who'd heard screaming and called the police, only to have Sailor send them away at Darius's insistence. The bank manager, who confirmed that Darius had forged Sailor's signature on multiple loan applications. Tom testified about his investigation, walking the jury through the financial records that proved systematic theft. Margaret testified about finding her daughter bleeding and terrified in the middle of the night. The child psychologist testified about Ava's trauma, her nightmares about her father. Each piece of evidence added weight to the prosecution's case. By the end of week 2, Darius's guilt was undeniable. The defense tried to poke holes to create reasonable doubt, but their case was weak, built on lies that crumbled under cross-examination. Darius's mother and sister contradicted themselves repeatedly. His friends who testified to his good character fell apart when shown evidence of his affairs and violence. On day 12, the defense rested. They had nothing left. Against his lawyer's advice, Darius insisted on testifying. It was the arrogance I'd seen at the wedding, the absolute certainty that he could charm his way out of anything. He was wrong. Patricia destroyed him methodically, made him admit to the affairs, to the stealing, to forging Sailor's signature. He tried to justify each action, to explain why he'd had no choice. "So you're saying your wife forced you to cheat on her?" Patricia asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "She was never home, always working. What was I supposed to do? Perhaps not commit adultery?" "You don't understand. She had all the power in the relationship, the money, the house. I was just trying to even things out. By stealing from her. By taking what was rightfully mine as her husband. Patricia showed him the photograph. And this was beating your wife and terrifying your daughter also about evening things out? Darius stared at the image, his face flushing red. That's not what it looks like. Really? Because it looks like a grown man about to hit a woman half his size while a 4-year-old cries in fear. Please explain what I'm missing. She was disrespecting me, talking back. I was just trying to get her attention. By hitting her. I barely touched her. Patricia pulled up the medical records. Your wife had a concussion, 3 broken ribs, and a fractured cheekbone from your barely touching her. The courtroom was silent. Even Darius's lawyer looked sick. I want you to look at your daughter in that photo, Patricia continued. Look at how scared she is. Is that the mark of a good father? Darius finally looked at the image of Ava. Something flickered across his face. Might have been shame if I thought him capable of it. I love my daughter, he said weakly. You terrorized your daughter, and your wife, and you did it because you could, because you're a coward who only feels powerful when he's hurting people weaker than himself. Objection, the defense attorney shouted. Withdrawn, Patricia said, but the damage was done. The jury had seen exactly who Darius was. The prosecution's closing argument was brutal and efficient. Patricia walked the jury through every piece of evidence, every testimony, every lie Darius had told. She made them see him not as a man who'd made mistakes, but as a predator who'd systematically destroyed a woman's life for his own gain. The defense wants you to believe this was a misunderstanding, she said, that these were private matters between husband and wife, but there's nothing private about theft, nothing private about fraud, nothing private about beating your wife so badly she requires hospitalization. This is not a domestic dispute. This is a crime spree that lasted 18 months, and the defendant needs to be held accountable. The defense's closing was desperate. They tried to paint Sailor as a vindictive ex-wife, me as a manipulative father. They claimed the photo was staged, the financial records misinterpreted. The jury didn't buy it. Deliberations lasted 3 hours. I sat in the hallway with Sailor, neither of us speaking. Ava was with Margaret, spared from watching this final act. When the bailiff called us back, my heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. Sailor gripped my hand, her palm sweaty. The jury foreman stood. On the charge of financial fraud, how do you find? Guilty. On the charge of identity theft? Guilty. On the charge of domestic violence? Guilty. 4 more guilty verdicts followed. Darius was convicted on all counts. He stood motionless as the verdicts were read, his face pale. His mother wailed dramatically in the back row. His lawyer slumped in defeat. The judge set sentencing for 2 weeks later. Darius was remanded into custody immediately. As the bailiffs led him away, he finally looked at me. I mouthed 3 words, the same words I'd said in Sailor's kitchen all those months ago. You are doomed. He looked away. The courtroom was quieter for sentencing. Most of the spectators had moved on to newer dramas. But I was there, and Sailor, and Margaret, the people who mattered. The judge was a woman in her 60s who'd heard thousands of cases in her career. She looked at Darius with cold contempt. I've read the pre-sentence report, she said. I've reviewed the evidence presented at trial. I've considered the arguments from both sides, and I find myself asking the same question. How does a man become so morally bankrupt that he's willing to destroy the people who love him? She paused, letting the question hang. You didn't just steal from your wife, Mr. Darius. You stole her sense of safety, her dignity, her trust in other human beings. You terrorized a child who should have been able to look to you for protection. And you did all this while presenting yourself as a respectable member of society. Darius's lawyer tried to interject, to plead for leniency. The judge cut him off. The fraud charges alone carry a maximum sentence of 10 years. The domestic violence charges carry 5. The identity theft adds another 3. I could sentence you consecutively, putting you in prison for nearly 2 decades. She let that sink in. However, I'm going to sentence you concurrently. 15 years in state prison with possibility of parole after 10. You'll also pay full restitution to your ex-wife for the money you stole, though I suspect you'll never be able to repay even a fraction of what you took. Darius swayed slightly. 15 years. He'd be in his 50s when he got out if he got parole. Additionally, you're to have no contact with the victim or your daughter. No letters, no phone calls, no third-party communication. If you violate this order, you'll serve the maximum sentence with no possibility of parole. Do you understand? Yes, Darius whispered. I didn't hear you. Yes, Your Honor. Good. Bailiff, remove the defendant. Darius was led away. He didn't look back at his mother or sister. Didn't try to catch Sailor's eye. Just walked out of the courtroom and out of our lives. Sailor let out a breath she'd been holding for months, maybe years. It's over, she said. It's over, I confirmed. The year after Darius's sentencing was about rebuilding. Sailor sold the house where so much pain had occurred and bought a smaller place closer to my apartment. She went back to work full-time, throwing herself into cases with renewed energy. Ava started kindergarten. She was nervous the first day, clinging to Sailor's hand. But she came home with paint on her dress and a smile on her face, talking about new friends and story time. I sold my construction business and semi-retired, taking on only small projects that interested me. Mostly I spent time with Ava, picking her up from school, taking her to the park, teaching her how to build things with wood and nails. She called me Grandpa now. Not the distant stranger who'd appeared at her 4th birthday, but Grandpa who made her laugh and kept her safe and always had time for her questions. Margaret became a fixture in our lives too. She and I developed an unlikely friendship, bonded by our shared mission to protect Sailor and Ava. We had dinner together every Sunday, the 4 of us, creating the family that Darius had tried so hard to destroy. Sailor started dating again eventually. Nothing serious, just coffee with colleagues or dinner with old friends. She was cautious, watchful for red flags. But she was also hopeful in a way I hadn't seen before. I'm not broken, she told me one evening. He tried to break me, but I'm still here, stronger than before. You always were strong, I said. You just forgot for a while. You reminded me. 2 years after the sentencing, a letter arrived from the prison. Darius had written to Sailor, despite the no-contact order. The warden had flagged it before it was sent, notified the court. Sailor read it in my presence, her face carefully neutral. He says he's sorry, she said, that he's found God in prison and realizes what he did was wrong. He wants me to forgive him. Do you? No. She folded the letter carefully. Maybe someday, for my own peace. But not because he asked for it, not because he thinks he deserves it. She handed the letter to Patricia, who added it to the file documenting Darius's parole violations. It would ensure he served his full sentence. He still doesn't understand, Sailor continued. Even now, he thinks saying sorry fixes everything. That I owe him forgiveness because he finally admitted what he did. You don't owe him anything. I know. It took me a long time to learn that, but I know it now. She smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. I don't think about him much anymore. Some days I forget he exists. That's the best revenge, isn't it? Not caring. I thought about the 3 words I'd spoken to him. You are doomed. I'd meant it as a threat, a promise of destruction. But sitting there with Sailor, watching her reclaim her life, I realized the real doom wasn't prison. It was irrelevance. Darius had lost everything that mattered. His wife, his daughter, his freedom. But more than that, he'd lost any significance in our lives. We'd moved on without him, built something better without him. He was nothing to us now. And that was the ultimate punishment. Ava was 7 when she started asking about her father. We'd been careful not to speak badly of him around her, letting her form her own conclusions based on her memories. "Grandpa," she said one afternoon, while we were building a birdhouse. "Where's my daddy?" I set down my hammer, choosing words carefully. "He's in prison." "Why?" "Because he did some very bad things and hurt people." She considered this, her small face serious. "Did he hurt Mommy?" "Yes." "And me?" "He scared you. That's a kind of hurting too." She hammered a nail, concentrating hard. "I don't really remember him. Is that bad?" "No, sweetheart, that's not bad at all." "Good, because I don't want to remember him. I like our family better now. Just you and Mommy and Grandma Margaret." She went back to hammering, the subject closed. I watched her work, this resilient little person who'd survived trauma that would have destroyed many adults. She was going to be okay. They both were. 3 years into Darius's sentence, Patricia called with news. He was requesting a hearing to modify the no-contact order. He wanted to see Ava. "Can he do that?" Saylor asked. "He can request it. The judge will decide. But given his history and the parole violations, I doubt it'll be granted." "I want to be there," Saylor said. "I want to face him one more time and tell him no." The hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. Saylor, Patricia and I sat on one side of the courtroom. Darius, thinner and greyer than before, sat with his lawyer on the other. The judge reviewed the request. "Mr. Darius, you're asking to have contact with your daughter despite a court order specifically forbidding this. Why?" "I'm her father," Darius said. "I have rights." "You forfeited those rights when you terrorized her as a toddler." "I've changed. I've been in therapy, anger management. I'm a different person now." The judge turned to Saylor. "Mrs. Darius, what are your thoughts?" Saylor stood, her voice clear and strong. "My daughter doesn't remember her father. She doesn't ask about him. She's happy and healthy and thriving without him in her life. Allowing him contact would only traumatize her again, and I won't let that happen." "He's her father," Darius interjected. "She needs to know me." "No," Saylor said, turning to look at him directly for the first time. "She needs to be safe. And you are not safe. You never were, and I don't believe you are now. You had 15 years to be a good father, and you chose to be a monster instead. That's on you, not me, not her. You don't get a second chance to hurt my child." Darius's face flushed red. "You turned her against me." "I didn't have to. Your actions did that all on their own." The judge banged her gavel. "I've heard enough. Request denied. The no-contact order remains in place for the duration of Mr. Darius's sentence and for 10 years following his release. This court is adjourned." Darius shouted something as he was led away, but I couldn't make out the words. Didn't matter. He'd lost again. Outside the courthouse, Saylor took a deep breath of free air. "That felt good," she said, standing up to him. "Realizing I'm not afraid of him anymore. He's just a pathetic man who destroyed his own life." She smiled. "You were right. He was doomed. Not because you took revenge, but because he was too broken to ever have anything real." Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Ava excelled in school, made friends easily, joined the soccer team. Saylor got promoted to partner at her firm, leading a department and mentoring younger lawyers. Margaret traveled, visiting countries she'd always wanted to see. And me, I found purpose in the small things, teaching Ava how to throw a baseball, helping Saylor with home repairs, having coffee with Margaret on Saturday mornings. I'd spent so many years feeling like I'd failed as a father, watching my son become someone I didn't recognize. But now I understood that some people choose darkness despite every opportunity to choose light. That wasn't my failure. That was Darius's. What mattered was what I did after. How I'd protected the innocent, fought for justice, helped Saylor and Ava build new lives from the wreckage. One Sunday afternoon, Saylor and I sat on her porch while Ava played in the yard. "I never thanked you properly," she said. "For what?" "For not giving up on us, for seeing what was happening and refusing to look away." She paused. "Most people did look away, made excuses. Told me I was lucky to have a husband at all. You deserved better than that. I know that now, but I didn't then. You helped me see it. She took my hand. You saved our lives, mine and Ava's, literally saved us. You saved yourselves. I just gave you the tools. Still, thank you. We sat in comfortable silence, watching Ava chase butterflies through the grass. The moment felt complete somehow, a full circle from that terrible birthday party to this peaceful Sunday afternoon. 5 years after his sentencing, Darius called from prison. He'd finally been granted one phone call to Sailor, supervised by the court. Patricia was on the line monitoring, as was I at Sailor's request. I don't know why I'm doing this, Sailor said before answering, but I guess I need closure. She picked up. Hello. Sailor. Darius's voice was hoarse. Thank you for taking my call. I almost didn't. I just wanted to say I'm sorry, really, genuinely sorry for everything I did to you. Okay. Is that all you're going to say? What else is there? You're sorry. I heard you. That doesn't change anything. I thought maybe we could talk, about us, about Ava. There is no us. There hasn't been for 5 years, and Ava doesn't want to know you. You could bring her to visit. I could explain. Explain what? How you beat me, how you stole from me, how you made our daughter so terrified that she still has nightmares. Sailor's voice was hard. There's nothing to explain, Darius. You showed us exactly who you are. People change. Maybe. But that's not my problem anymore. You lost the right to be part of our lives. I'm her father. No. A father protects his children, loves them, puts their needs first. You're just the man who scared a little girl so badly that she forgot your face, and she's better off for it. Silence on the other end. I hope you find peace, Sailor continued. I really do, but you won't find it with us. We've moved on. We're happy, and we're never looking back. She hung up without waiting for a response. How do you feel? Patricia asked. Sailor considered. Free, completely and totally free. Ava graduated from elementary school in the spring. She'd been chosen to give a speech at the ceremony, something about dreams and futures and working hard. She stood at the podium in her little cap and gown, confident and poised. I want to thank the people who helped me get here, she said. My mom, who worked so hard to give me everything I need. My grandpa, who taught me that I can build anything if I'm patient. And my grandma, who shows me that it's never too late to chase your dreams. She didn't mention Darius. He was a non-entity in her narrative, erased not through bitterness, but through simple irrelevance. After the ceremony, we took photos on the school lawn. Ava between Sailor and me, all of us grinning. Margaret snapped picture after picture, documenting this moment of triumph. I'm so proud of you, baby, Sailor said, hugging her daughter close. I'm proud of you too, Mom, Ava replied. You're the strongest person I know. Sailor's eyes filled with tears, the good kind, the kind that came from joy instead of pain. That night, after Ava was in bed, Sailor and I sat in her kitchen drinking tea. Do you ever regret it? She asked. The revenge, the trial, all of it? Never. Do you? No. I regret staying as long as I did. I regret not seeing the truth sooner. But getting out, fighting back, that I'll never regret. You did what you had to do to survive. There's no shame in that. I used to think I was weak for not leaving sooner, but now I realize staying took strength too. Surviving each day, protecting Ava as much as I could, waiting for the right moment. She smiled. And when you showed up and gave me that moment, I took it. You're remarkable, you know that. I'm just a woman who refused to let a bad man define her story. That's what makes you remarkable. Epilogue. 10 years later, Darius was released after serving 10 years. He'd earned parole through good behavior and completion of rehabilitation programs. The no-contact order still had 10 years remaining. I learned about his release through Patricia, who kept tabs on his status. He moved to another state, found work in a warehouse, lived in a small apartment alone. His mother had died while he was in prison. His sister wanted nothing to do with him. He was 52 years old and had nothing. No family, no friends, no career. Just the consequences of his choices, playing out year after year in a life of solitude and regret. Meanwhile, Ava was 17. She'd been accepted to 3 different universities, all with scholarships. She wanted to be an architect, to build things that would last. She had her grandfather's hands, and her mother's brain, and a heart that hadn't been hardened by the trauma of her early years. Sailor ran her own firm now, specializing in family law and domestic violence cases. She'd helped dozens of women escape situations like hers, using her experience to guide them through the legal system and out the other side. Margaret had become a domestic violence advocate, speaking at shelters and fundraisers about the importance of believing victims and supporting survivors. And me? I was 71 years old, healthy and content. I'd built a life I was proud of, not through my son, but despite him. My real family was Sailor and Ava and Margaret, the people who'd chosen to love me and whom I'd chosen to protect. Final moments. It was Thanksgiving when Ava asked the question I'd been expecting for years. "Grandpa, do you ever think about him? My biological father?" We were in my workshop staining wood for a bookshelf she'd designed. Her university project, something to take with her when she left for school in the fall. "Sometimes," I admitted. "Mostly I wonder if he understands what he lost." "Do you think he does?" "I don't know. Some people never learn. They just keep making the same mistakes, blaming everyone else for their problems." She dipped her brush in the stain, applied it with careful strokes. "I looked him up once, on the internet, saw his mugshot from the trial. And? I didn't feel anything. He was just some guy, no connection at all. That's healthy. Is it weird that I don't want to meet him, even now that I'm almost grown up? Not weird at all. You get to decide who's in your life. Nobody has a right to your time or attention just because you share DNA. Mum says you saved us, both of us. Your mum saved herself. I just helped." "You're too modest," she grinned, "but I'll let you have it. This time." We worked in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes from years of trust and love. Outside, the November sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. This was revenge, I realized. Not the trial or the prison sentence or the public humiliation. This was it. Building something beautiful with my granddaughter, living a life full of purpose and connection, surrounded by people who chose to be family. Darius had tried to destroy us. Instead, he destroyed only himself. I looked at Ava, this brilliant young woman who'd survived the worst of humanity and come out stronger. She was applying to architecture school, planning to build structures that would outlast all of us, creating beauty where there'd been ugliness, strength where there'd been fear. That was the ultimate victory. Not just surviving, but thriving. Not just escaping, but flourishing. "Grandpa?" Ava said, pulling me from my thoughts. "Yeah? Thank you. For everything. For being my real father when I needed one." My throat tightened. "That's the greatest honor of my life." She hugged me, getting stain on both our clothes. We laughed, cleaned up the mess, finished the bookshelf together. Later that evening, the 4 of us gathered around Sailor's table for Thanksgiving dinner. We held hands, said grace, talked about our blessings. Ava's college acceptances, Sailor's newest case victory, Margaret's upcoming trip to Ireland. My health, still holding strong. Nobody mentioned Darius. He was a ghost from a past we'd outgrown, a cautionary tale we'd turned into triumph. As I looked around that table at these 3 incredible women, I realized something profound. I'd set out to destroy my son, to exact revenge for what he'd done. But in the process, I'd built something far more valuable than revenge. I'd built a family, a real one, based on love and respect and choice. Darius was doomed the moment he chose violence over love, cruelty over kindness. His doom wasn't the prison sentence or the lost years. It was this: being forgotten by the people he should have cherished, being replaced by something better, something true. We finished dinner, cleaned up together, laughed over pie and coffee, made plans for Christmas, for Ava's graduation, for all the tomorrows stretching out before us, and somewhere, in a small apartment in another state, a man sat alone with his regrets. He'd had everything that mattered and thrown it away. Now all he had were memories of what could have been, if only he'd been capable of being better. But that was his burden to carry, not ours. We were free,